Well, it's good to be here. We are doing episode 3 of Stories from the Field. I've got my brother here with me, Pastor Matthias Manene, Spokane, Washington. And it's good to have you.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
So, if we could talk, if we could go back and you could talk maybe about your early years of knowing God was wanting to use you, that
Yeah.
God was wanting to use you for something.
Uh huh. Okay. I remember growing up and our mom, always telling us about how whenever one of her sons we would be born, the doctors would tell her they're going to be great football players, they're going to be great athletes, but she always told them no, they're going to be great preachers. And from just hearing the stories from mom, her telling us how she would tell the doctors that all the time, and plus us hearing her pray all the time, Lord, use my boys to be preachers. I kind of fell in love with it. I remember growing up preaching to myself in the mirror in the bathroom.
Yeah.
But I remember we would, whenever we play, we would, not that we were good kids, because we were probably a whole lot worse than most. But
Yeah.
I remember, I remember we would play around and baptize each other. So I kind of developed uh, a call uh, to do the things of God at a very young age.
Yeah, I remember we were really young. We were in Laura, Waja, Ajel
Uh,
Daga. We'd be over there. We'd be praying with people
yeah,
in jail or at the hospital.
yeah.
So you come back from Marshall to the States. Um, how old were you when you got back to the States?
I was 17 years old. Came back 2013. I believe it was August or if not September.
I see. So what were the different challenges? I mean, when you left, you were a child. When you came back to the States, now you're later on in your teen years. So what were the challenges, the different challenges for a 17-year-old?
I guess for me was the expectation that uh, people expected from me, and because you came before I came, I believe a year before I came back to the States, and the stories that were going around you was he's a great evangelist, he's a great example, and then for me it was trying to meet those same expectations when I knew that as a 17-year-old I knew it was going to be tough.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when you got back to got back to the States. Uh, I remember we got an apartment,
Yeah,
and we would try to support other people.
yeah.
So after I moved out, I got married. What was it like if you were to talk to young men that have to, they have to learn how to live for God on their own between
Right.
18 and 20? What would be the advice you would give them?
The biggest advice that I'd give them is uh, listen to your man of God, because
Yeah.
I remember when I was 18 at the time, I had friends joining the forces, joining the army, and I wanted to join the army at 18 years old. And I remember I had already gotten accepted, was gonna join, but I talked to my pastor, who was
Yeah.
my talked to my bishop, who was my pastor at the time, and I remember him just telling me after I asked him if I could join the army. He looked at me and he said, "Well, do you want to be a preacher?" And I
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Well, I don't think it's a good idea." And I'm very thankful that I uh, took his advice. He was a very wise man. But
Yes.
yeah, listening to your pastor and getting words of advice, and uh, he's the one that God's chosen for you to lead you in the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Thank God for Bishop. Uh,
Yeah,
he gave us lots of chances. I know.
yes, he did.
I know he gave me a lot of chances.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so you're going through life as a single young man, and then you're gonna get married. Um, how
yeah,
important is it to find somebody that's in church, and then find somebody that maybe you talk with your elders or talk with your pastor mainly, but like trying to find the right wife. I know Nana Parker had told me whoever you marry is going to make you or break you.
that's right.
And that was some of the best advice I ever got. But can you talk a little bit about that to young men that they know God wants to use them, and so they've got to marry right?
That's right. Well, for me, as a young man, uh, I got married at 21 years of age. Uh, my late wife uh, was 32, I believe. So we were 11 years apart. And I remember uh, praying and asking God about uh, a good wife, and what what kind of made it awkward was, I guess, we were uh, 11 years apart.
Yeah.
Not just that, but we were third cousins. We were not that close, but
Right.
I
Right.
remember my when I had prayed for a wife, and I never regret uh, every moment that I spent with her.
Yeah.
It was precious.
Yeah.
But when I went and talked to my bishop, I remember I was struggling with, man, is she the one? Because a lot of people didn't want us to get married,
Yeah.
and a lot of people were talking about us, saying stuff about us. And
Yeah.
I remember I went and talked to Bishop, and he was our pastor at the time, and
Right.
he said, "Well, I think she's a good one. You should marry her." And
Right.
when I heard that come from Bishop, I shut out every other voice that was out there, whether it was uncles or close family members.
Right.
I shut out all those other voices, and I obeyed my man of God. And uh, she really, in listening and obeying the man of God's voice, it really showed. A lot of people
Yeah.
had told us to our faces we'd never be used by God,
Yeah.
we'd never become anything. Uh, and there were some that even said that I had lost the call of God. But it goes to show that every time you obey the man of God's voice, God will bless you
Yeah.
beyond measure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
He's done that for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Listening to Bishop tell you who to marry and marrying her, do you have any regrets?
No, I do not. Uh, I'd say uh, she we grew very close together.
Yeah.
Became uh, she wasn't just my wife, but she was my best friend,
Yeah.
and I don't regret it at all.
Yeah.
We'd go to places to the point where we'd go to places and, like, for example, our son's appointments, and they'd ask our years, how old we were, and I tell them, "Oh, I'm 26," and she'd say, "I'm 37," and they'd always say, look at her and say, "Oh man, you robbed the cradle," and I'd always tell them, "No, I think I just got very lucky."
Yeah. 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 So that's important for young men that want to do something for God to make sure don't
Yeah,
just rush into marriage,
that's right.
but talk with your leadership, talk to the people that care about you, pray for you before you make those steps.
That's right.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, or I know a lot of young men that just jumped into it without seeking the advice, and then later on
Right.
finding out that they're in a lot of heartache.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. And it's sad to see, especially when uh, they end up having kids and stuff like that. It's sad that uh, they they didn't want to hear the words of advice, and they didn't want to obey what an elder, or especially the man of God, told them to do. And
yeah,
the effects of it just doesn't affect the husband or the wife, but it's seen it uh, affect the kids
yeah.
is something else.
Right, right. Okay, so you married the right woman. You got the right advice. So
Right.
once you guys get married, what did you guys start doing in the church? Was there any specific ministry, or was there any specific job, or was there any spot in the church that you guys took on as far as work and ministry?
Yeah. When we got married, it was 2017. And then later on that year in September, uh, we we had we adopted our baby boy, Davian, and I wouldn't trade him for anything. But
Right.
we later on, I believe it was November or December when we started doing Bible study classes with the college kids that were there. And if not, it was 2018. It wasn't very long uh, till we kind of jumped in. And I remember when we got married, uh, my wife actually looked at me, my late wife, and she said, "Well, uh, make up your mind whether you're going to live for God or not, because I'm going to live for God."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was crazy hearing that from her, because uh, we grew up with mom and dad always telling us, "You guys got to make up your mind
Yeah.
that you're going to live for God."
Yeah.
And so before we even got married, I'd always think and say to myself, if I get married, I'm going to make sure that I let my wife know that no matter what, I'm going to live for God. So it coming from her first,
Yeah.
uh, I knew that our marriage, God was going to bless it.
Yeah.
And but later on, I believe it was a year later, we started doing uh, the Bible study classes uh, with the college kids, the kids that would come to the university there in La Grande. And I believe there was about 3 weeks, or if not even a month, where we averaged about 30 to 40 kids coming to our Bible studies every Tuesday night.
Wow.
And but that's what we did. And then, of course, when you guys left to start the church there in Enid, you guys were Sunday school teachers, and you guys had a cleaning team. You guys were leaders of the cleaning team.
I remember.
We took over that. it, like I said, the expectation. Because I remember brother Justin Hoyt and sister Wendy, after you guys had left, it was about a month later, they came and they asked me and my wife if we wanted to take over your guys'
Yeah.
Sunday school class.
Yeah. Yeah.
And uh, we we did. And then the cleaning, we no one had to ask us. It was
Yeah.
something that we wanted to do for the church, so we kind of just took that role.
Yeah. I think that kind of gets lost. I think there's young couples that are in such a rush for God to like elevate them that they don't have time for like the cleaning or
That's right.
the cooking. And
Yeah,
but that's what keeps the church going, and that's what keeps the church presentable.
that's right. That's right. I gotta say, because we did that for about 2, if not 3 years before we started coming to Spokane to start the church. But I gotta say, those 2 to 3 years were probably the longest years of my life. I remember when it would be uh, when we'd be on the schedule to clean the church. Uh, I it'd be Monday, and I'd already be thinking about, okay, if Saturday comes, who's going to show up and who's not going to show up.
Yeah.
But I like like you said, those are some of the things that people just forget about. And but like Bishop always said, if you want to become a preacher, you've got to learn how to take care of the church first,
Right.
the physical church, the building. Because if you don't know how to take care of the building, you won't know how to take care of the people that God gives you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was about 2 to 3 years that you guys did that in LeGrand. So you're doing Bible studies with college kids. You're doing Sunday school. You're doing cleaning. So what was the? When did you guys start the Bible studies in Spokane or the services? I don't know what you started.
It was around, uh, I'd say May, the first week of May was when we started because the
What
second,
year was that?
2019,
Okay. Okay.
because the second year we brought Brother Piada, a great man that had passed
Right.
last year
Yeah.
from our church. We had brought him to that first May conference,
Mm,
not the first May conference, but our first May conference
right.
after starting the church here in Spokane. But what we would do is we would, uh, right after work every Friday, we'd drive straight to Spokane,
Uh huh.
and all day Saturday we just go knock doors and invite people to church. And in 2019, we only had one service
Okay.
throughout the whole week, and that service would happen. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was 2, if not 1, in the afternoon.
Okay.
But the reason why we would come to Spokane and kind of knock doors and try to get Bible studies and get people to church. Not only were we looking for new souls, but because we only had one service
Yeah.
every week, it you could kind of see, not kind of, but you could see the effects of people not going to church and not being around the people of God enough.
Right. Right.
Because by the time we get back on Saturday, it was almost like we had to reignite the fire of them wanting to go to church.
Right.
Because
Right.
from Monday through Friday, they were doing whatever they wanted to do. and then Saturday we'd come, and then Sunday we'd only just have one service with them.
Right. So was that all of 2019 that there was only one service a week?
Yes,
So from May all the way till the end of 2019.
that's right.
Wow. So that's a lot of weekends to drive to Spokane and back.
That's right. Well, I believe we came, if not September, August. We fully moved here in 2019. If not August, the month of August, the month of September. But even when we moved here, because we were renting hotel conference rooms, and those can get expensive real quick.
Right,
Uh,
right.
I I know for about 4 hours we were paying about 170, if not $230, just to
Whoa.
have service for 4 hours.
Yeah,
And but yeah, we from May till August, we every weekend, every Friday, we have to here, drive up here to Spokane, have service, and then service would end on Sunday around 5 or 6 p.m., and then we'd
yeah.
have to drive back to La Grande to get ready for work on Monday.
Right, right. Okay. So you guys are making that transition to Spokane. At this time, how old are you?
I am 21.
Okay. So you get to Spokane at 21 years old. Um, and so if you had any words of advice for 21-year-olds that are going out and starting a church, what would you tell them?
Same thing. I'll always come back to listen to your man of God. Uh, I never rushed it for the longest time, uh, from May, the beginning of May, till mid August, if not September. There were days that I would work 14, 16-hour days on Friday. And knowing that we'd have to drive up to Spokane, which is about 4.5 hours, uh, to have church on Sunday and do outreach the very next day, Saturday. Uh, but we, there was a lot of times when uh, it was tiring. But I remember when my bishop told me to come here, the Spokane, I never did question him. I never asked why. Never told him there's another man that can do it better than me. I just obeyed his voice. Whatever he did, whatever
Yeah,
he told me to do, that's what I did.
yeah,
And so for young preachers that are looking to get into the ministry, the number one thing you've got to do is be submitted to your man of God.
right. Yeah, and we live in a time where nobody wants to be submitted.
Right.
Everybody just wants to do their own thing. But there's
Uh-huh.
so much safety in being submitted to the authority that God places in your life.
That's right.
You know, you're talking about just doing whatever your pastor tells you to do, even if it's like, even if you think you might not be good at it. But I think about like Noah, and nowhere in
Uh-huh.
the Bible does it talk about him building a house or a shed or something
That's
like
right.
that before God tells him build this really big ark.
Uh-huh.
But he goes and he's obedient to what God wants him to do, and God develops him, and
Yeah.
he ends up building this ark that all these animals can get on, and him and his family can get on.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys get to Spokane. You guys are working in Spokane. Um, Are there any specific stories you want to talk about when you guys first got there? Were there any?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, when we first got here, um, when after Bishop had told us to move, uh, it was a Wednesday. I remember it was a Wednesday night. He came and sat by me, and he said, "I think it's time for you to look for a job in Spokane." And so that night, I went told my wife, and then she told Sister Mina Leckenby, the pastor's wife of Rock Springs,
Yeah, yeah.
where Brother Nathan Leckenby pastors. And Sister Mina told her husband, Brother Nate Leckenby, that we were going to move there. And so Brother Nate Leckenby knew of Brother Nick Castillo.
Uh huh.
And Brother Nick knew a guy that was looking for an employee doing water filters. They call it Connecticut.
Okay.
And so Brother Nate texted him. It was after church that night, and asked him if he was looking for, uh, if his friend, if he texted Brother Nick to see if his friend was looking for another employee. And that same night, long story short, I had the job. I was going to go in
Wow.
for an interview. Uh, believe it was Friday when I was going to go in for the interview. So I drove up here to Spokane for that interview, I believe Thursday night, and left my wife, our oldest son, in LeGrand, came up for the interview, and that very next Monday I started working.
Wow.
Well, that Sunday after I had the interview, I went and told Bishop, I said, I found a job. And he said, "Man, that's very quick."
Hmm.
And he asked me, "When do you start working?" And I said, "Tomorrow." So I drove up here to Spokane Sunday night.
Wow.
And
Wow.
when I got here, uh, I had to sleep at um, a family member, a church member's house. It's actually the house of the my wife to be
Okay.
now, uh, brother Serpent and sister Meritha's house. I
Right.
slept at their house while my wife was in LeGrand, and I remember there were nights when, uh, because it wasn't my house,
Right.
I'd go to work, and then there were nights when I'd just sleep in the car
Yeah.
just because I wasn't too comfortable. Uh, but after that, I did that for about 2 weeks, and then after that, my uh, thank God for Brother Jess and Sister Charity
Yeah.
Walter. Walter, they lended us their vehicle, their truck and trailer, and we were able to move all of our stuff up here to Spokane.
Yeah.
And we lived in a very small apartment while we were here. And I remember when, I believe it was about 4 or 5 months into working at that water filter uh, place called Connecticut. It After I worked there for 4 to 5 months, not 6 months, I got laid off,
Wow.
and I remember coming home being bummed, not knowing what to do because uh, I grew up with a dad that worked
Yeah.
2 jobs just to support our family.
Right.
And
Right.
like that work ethic was already put into us.
Right.
And when I came home, and I didn't know what to tell my wife because I had just gotten laid off. Winter was coming, and but yeah, it was tough
Yeah.
because for the longest time we were, uh, and this is how it is with every preacher. I'm sure you've done it, especially if you're starting a brand new church.
Right.
Uh, I wasn't only bummed because I wouldn't have any more income to support my family,
Yeah.
but it was also my income helped with us getting a place to have service
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
on Sundays, and that's what really kind of made me bummed for being laid off.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's definitely when you start trying to do something for God, you know, and you step out like that, opposition always happens to see if you can stick it out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so you guys are in Spokane. This is late 2019, correct?
that's right.
And then COVID hits 2020.
That's right.
So, can you talk to us about having church during COVID?
Oh man, uh, I'm I'm not trying to be political, but Washington is a pretty liberal state, and
Yeah.
so when COVID happened, we were renting a place called the Spokane Women's Club,
Uh huh.
and it's a very old building here in Spokane. It's got a bunch of history to it. We were renting, anyways. We were renting that building, and when COVID hit, because they were government funded, when COVID hit, it shut everything down.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
didn't have a place to go to church. The hotels weren't even opening their conference rooms, and so we had to have service in our little two-bedroom apartment,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we were on the third floor, and
Yeah.
uh, you know us apostolics, we as apostolics we get crazy sometimes when uh,
Yeah.
we have church,
Yeah.
and being on the third floor, I remember there were days when our neighbors down below us would start hitting their ceiling
Yeah.
with like brooms and stuff if
Yeah.
we got too wild, and but it was rough.
Yeah.
And I remember while we were having service, it was about July,
Yeah.
mid-July, someone had gotten on our Facebook live and
Yeah.
commented, these people are still having service in their apartment.
Yeah.
What's the matter? Are they too poor? Or they said something,
Yeah.
kind of mocking us for having service in our apartment. And I remember I had one of the guys from the church preaching that day, and my wife was watching the live, reading the comments, and she saw that comment, and she told me, she said, come and look at this comment." I went and
Yeah.
read it, and they were making fun of us for not having a building.
Yeah.
And then after I read the comment, after the brother had finished preaching, and I went up to give an altar call online, and I went up to give an altar call, and I told them, I said, I just want everybody watching to know that before this year ends, we're going to get a building with a
Yeah.
big old sign on the front of it. And
Yeah.
it's not going to be anybody else's. It's going to be ours. And
Right.
we'll get to do whatever we want to do in the building.
Yeah.
And if you come to Spokane today, we're renting the building,
Yeah.
but we do have a big sign, and
Yeah.
we get to have service whenever we want to have service.
Right. 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 Yeah. And the church is doing great.
That's right. God's
Yeah.
good.
So y'all have a you do have a church school, correct?
That's right.
So when did it start, and what was the process of getting it started?
Well, it started 2 years ago. We had our first graduation, uh, 2021, and we only had two graduates that year, one last year.
Yeah,
But when we first started our school, uh, it was rough because, especially trying to get the transcripts from the public schools transferred over to our school.
yeah, yeah,
It was rough. They thought we were a fake school. We weren't real. Whatever. They said a bunch of stuff.
yeah,
And starting it out, the reason why we started it actually was, number one, we came from the church in LeGrand.
right, right.
You guys also came from there, but
Yeah,
seeing how much having a Christian school, a church school, helped me out as a young man, I wanted to do it for our young people here in Spokane
yeah,
because they're the future of the church.
yeah,
And the book of Proverbs says, uh, where there's no vision, the people perish.
yeah,
And then you go to the book of Acts, chapter 2, where Peter's preaching on the day of Pentecost. Uh,
yeah,
the ones that are supposed to have the vision are the young men.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I really do believe in our young people. And
yeah,
so, in spite of everything happening and people saying, "No, it's not real," and I actually had parents. We had these forms that the kids would take home to their parents to get them enrolled in our school.
yeah,
Uh, the kids would take them to their parents, and the kids said their parents would rip it up, rip the
mm,
form up because they said, "Ah, it's not a real school. It's not going to help you." And but when we started the school, it was rough starting out. But
yeah,
this year, thank God for Brother Nick and Sister Krista.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, they've got us enrolled in a program called WAVA,
yeah,
where uh, it's live teaching. They have live teachers. It's all on uh, online, and
yeah,
it's all free. It's public school, but you get to see every single thing that they teach, and
right,
every subject that they take. You can pick and choose which subject you want your kids to learn and which subjects you don't want your kids to learn. So we're thankful for that.
right. And yeah, that's the biggest thing is able to monitor what the kids
Yeah,
are learning. Because I mean,
that's right.
we give them to somebody for 8 hours a day, 5 days
Uh,
a week, and we don't know what they're teaching them. Then we have no idea what our kids are learning.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You guys also have a really good Bible quizzing program.
Yes. Um, growing up, and you'll say that this is true. Us as boys, I don't even remember our sisters being in Bible quizzing.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you remember?
I think maybe Charlene 1 year or 2 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but nothing after that.
Yeah.
For us boys, we were automatically enrolled.
Yeah.
Uh, the way uh, we were introduced to Bible quizzing
Yeah.
was I remember when I became a junior because I don't know if back then they didn't have beginners division,
Yeah.
but as a junior, I remember being a junior and my mom
Yeah.
bringing quiz cards to me and telling me, "Here you go, learn them.
Yeah.
You're in Bible quizzing."
Yeah.
And so we had no choice.
Yeah.
And I wasn't I wasn't the best quizzer, but I could quiz. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think I
Yeah.
think I just did it to get out of the whoopings that that our parents would give us, because
Yeah.
we were required to be in Bible quizzing.
Yeah. I remember
But
that.
you did really good. You even made it to nationals.
Yeah.
But with our Bible quizzing program, uh, that's where my wife played a. I mean, she wore many hats
Yeah. Yeah.
in the church here in Spokane.
Right.
But one of her biggest uh, accomplishments and things that she wanted to do was to have the best Bible quizzers there was in
Yeah.
the whole the whole nation, the whole world. And she
Yeah.
would tell our kids that all the time.
Yeah.
She was very strict on them,
Yeah.
but she would always come back and say, "I'm doing this because I want you guys to be the best."
Yeah.
And we do. We actually won the finals of last year,
Yeah.
uh, last year's Bible quizzing tournament.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but she played a big role. A lot of our young people and kids that are getting into Bible quizzing this year have told me, "Man, Pastor, this year is going to be different without Sister Manene, my late wife,
Yeah.
here to uh, coach them and teach them how to quiz."
Yeah. Yeah. I remember hearing about you guys winning the finals and getting ready to go to nationals.
Yeah,
That's a big step. Was that your second year quizzing as a church?
it was our second year.
That's a lot of
That's
ground to
right.
cover in 2 years.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I want to say I'm very proud of what God's doing, and I'm proud of what you're allowing God to do in your life. Uh, there's a there's you've got family there.
Yeah,
So how is it you know juggling like family and church? And I know a lot of times they mix because you have family at church.
yeah,
But if you could talk a little bit about it, say a pastor has a lot of family that goes to church. Can you talk about like how that is and what the benefits are of having
yeah.
family close to you?
Man, there's a lot of benefits
Yeah.
of having uh, your family in church, because I've got mom and dad here,
Right. Right.
uh, and I had our sister here
Yeah.
that passed. Her and her husband, brother Kai Tamare, he actually lives with me now uh, for this time being. But they were they were everywhere in the church,
Right.
wherever
Right.
we needed them, and whatever we needed them to do, they were always available. And
Yeah.
it's there's nothing like knowing that when things go down, you've got family to back you up.
Yeah.
Uh, but one thing I've always told my family is the church, because this is what God's called me to do, and this is where
Right.
God's called me to be.
Right.
The church, nobody will be able to come in between me and the church, if it's
Right.
because it's my responsibility. In the book of John, where uh, Jesus had shown up to the disciples and Peter was naked and he jumped into the water because he
Right.
was
Right.
naked.
Yeah.
Well, when Jesus around the fire, when he was speaking to Peter, what he told Peter, he said, "Do you really love me?" And Peter said, "Yes, I do." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And we
Right.
know he was talking about his people, the
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
of God.
Right. Right.
And so, my number one job, as I'm thankful for my family and I'm thankful that God's placed them in my life and in the church. But if I really do love God, then the church has got to come first.
Right. Right.
Just like we preach to everybody else, right?
Right.
We we tell them, like, if they have a birthday party in another state and they come and ask me and they say, "Pastor, we've got a birthday party to go to." I'll always tell them, "Well, how much do you love God and how much do you love the church?"
Yeah.
Trying to get them to stay around the church and not go to the birthday party.
Yeah.
And not that I say that to everybody, but I'll say that to, young saints and saints that uh, struggle in living for God.
Yeah.
When if I know that uh, a family member or a friend that they used to hang around with and get drunk with is going
Right.
to be at that birthday party
Right.
drunk, then I'll do everything to try to get them not to go. Not because I don't
Right.
want them to go. Well, in a way, I don't want them to go because I don't want them to go back uh,
Right.
into their old lifestyle, drinking and all of that stuff. But I always uh, like, if anything were to happen, like, I know I've got family in the church to
Yeah.
have my back. But I'm also thankful for the church.
Yeah.
And I remember Bishop preaching one time where I can't remember what was going on, but several people were talking about people in the church, and he said, "Don't talk to them. Don't talk about them to
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
because I don't want to hear it."
Yeah.
And so, uh, growing up under a pastor like that and having a bishop like that,
Yeah.
it's really shaped me into uh, not that I'm fully the person that God wants me to be, and I'm perfect because I'll never be perfect, and
Right.
I've got a lot of things to work on. But I believe every single day that I wake up, I'm I'm well. If I'm not doing it, I'm doing my very best
Yeah.
to do what God wants me to do.
Right. Right. Yes. So in Spokane, I mean, we talk with different people. Everybody's got different things they deal with in different areas. I mean, if you boil it all down, it's still we're still fighting lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, pride of life.
Uh-huh.
All of us are, but different areas. Is there something that you've seen in your area that you've had to is something you've had to come up against a lot, or something that seems like it's been there for a long time? And it could be negative or positive.
Yeah, yeah. With just the city of Spokane, I believe, um, and there might be a lot of people that get mad at me when I say this, but it's the truth. Uh, there's there's a lot of, I'd say, we battle laziness a whole lot here
Okay.
in Spokane, because here in Spokane, uh, especially the state of Washington, and this is what me and my wife had battled with when we had came to Spokane first. Um,
Yeah.
almost every household, Marshallese household, and not just Marshallese household, but it was everywhere. but the wife would go to work and the husband would stay home. And
Yeah.
because how it's crazy just the amount of help, uh, government government assistance that you
Yeah.
get in the state of Washington
Right.
is
Right.
crazy. You can go and get food stamps and not work. I know I ran into many people here in Spokane that have tried to sell me their food stamps
Wow.
uh, for cash, and it's easy if you go
Yeah.
into uh, the DSHS office and you apply for food stamps. That very same day you can get food stamps, and there's so much assistance. There's SNAP where it's a program where if you're behind on your utility bills or your rent, you can go fill out an application and they'll pay your whole rent. There
Wow.
are some people that I've heard um, SNAP has covered 6 months of their rent in
Wow.
advance, and sometimes it can range between 1,000 to 2,500 bucks
A month.
and a month,
Wow.
and it's paid in advance for 6 months.
Wow.
And uh, I guess what we battle here is uh, laziness, being relaxed. But I believe that there was a reason why when God kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden, He told Adam,
Yeah.
if you're ever going to eat, you're going to eat because of the sweat of your brow.
That's right. That's
And
right.
it, it's it, it's it's dangerous to uh, especially be a part of this generation that we're in now, that where everyone's just relaxing
Yeah.
because it just like the days of Noah, that's how
Yeah.
the Son of Man is going to come. That's how
Yeah.
Jesus is going to come back.
Yeah.
Everybody will be relaxed, partying, drinking, uh, giving in marriage, and doing all the stuff.
Yeah.
But what we've got to realize, especially us as men, and I, I don't know why I'm saying this, but it's just um, it's important for us. We didn't just grow up with a dad that taught us to work, but
Yeah.
we grew up with a pastor that preached work.
Yeah.
And so I
Right.
preach it a lot here in
Yeah.
Spokane.
Yeah.
But I'd say that's the number one thing that we face.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, like I said, every field is unique. How about like what is the one thing about Spokane that like makes it stand out? Something you love, or something when you were driving into town, your wife loved it at first sight, or was there anything about Spokane that caught you guys? As far as, I mean,
Oh
if
man,
God calls you somewhere, you
yeah,
got to go, whether you like it or not, you know. But
yeah,
God will make you love where you're at. Like I
that's
love
right.
Enid. Enid's it's all plains, you know. There's no mountains. We grew
Yeah,
up around mountains. But
yeah,
being in Enid now, I love Enid. I don't like people talking about it. I like
yeah.
everything about it. So if there's anything about
Same.
Spokane that you love about your city,
I love. I mean, I said that we battle laziness, which is true, but it's there's nothing like Spokane because I remember I didn't like Spokane to be
yeah,
honest. The first two times we came to Spokane because seeing the amount of homelessness and
yeah,
uh, drugs, people doing drugs on the side of the road, seeing that kind of and the traffic. We
yeah,
grew
yeah,
up in LeGrand
yeah.
where traffic was you didn't even have to worry about traffic
Right,
to
right.
the point to where for the drive test, if you were going to get your license, if you failed the drive test in LeGrand,
Yeah.
uh, then you were really a bad driver because
Right.
it's not, the traffic's not that bad.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Right.
but when when I came about the third time, what made me fall in love with Spokane was I remember coming down uh, because there's like a hill when you enter into Spokane, and
Mm.
coming down that hill, and it was nighttime, and me just
Yeah.
seeing the city and the lights of the city, and
Yeah.
then I looked up. God told me, He said, "Look up," and I looked up and I saw the mountains,
Yeah.
and it kind of mixed mixed in the small city lifestyle with like, and Spokane's not even considered a big city, but
Right.
to me,
Yeah.
it's a big city, and
Right.
uh, right where I live, you I can drive about 10-15 minutes and be on the mountains, the countryside,
Yeah.
and then drive 10 to 15 minutes and be in the city. And so
Yeah.
I love that. Not
Yeah.
only that, but the people,
Yeah.
the people of God here in Spokane.
Yeah.
I say this all the time, uh, and I say it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but I don't just say this to the people of Spokane Lighthouse Church's face to make them feel good, but I
Yeah.
really do mean it from the bottom of my heart when I
Right.
say like it. I wouldn't trade what
Yeah.
I have here in Spokane for anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
No amount of money, no amount of possession, or any type of car will
Yeah.
be able to make me say, okay, what I have here is not as good as what they've got to offer.
Right. 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 And also, covetousness is a sin. I mean, to want something that's
Yeah,
not yours, you know.
that's right.
But
That's
that's
right.
for that's for every young person that's trying to build a church or something like that. You're gonna go through tough
Yeah.
times, and there's gonna be
Oh man.
there's gonna be a there's always gonna be something pulling in you, and it'll always try to make you compare yourself, compare your city, compare the church you pastor.
That's right.
So for somebody struggling with like that kind of a mindset, what kind of advice would you give them to like? Because I'm hearing you talk about your city. You love your city, not just the city.
Yeah.
You love the people of God in the city. And so,
Yeah.
like for a young man that's out there, and I mean we're young, but somebody younger than us, I guess,
Yeah.
that's starting a church or something like that. But do you have advice for them, like to fall in love with their city, with the people of God in their city?
Yeah. Um, my advice is to really, well, this is what Bishop had always said, and I believe he said it at No Limits,
Okay.
or there was a conference at Reverend Tony Spell's church where he preached about the treasure is in the field.
Oh man, that's my favorite.
And I love that message. It's my
Yeah.
favorite too. Uh, there are times when I feel down.
Yeah.
Uh, it, just the stress and the pressure of uh, being a pastor, and not
Yeah.
just a pastor, but a father, a husband, a
Yeah.
son, a
Yeah.
brother. Like just all that pressure. There are times when I'll just have to go back and listen uh,
Yeah.
to that message, because one thing that he said in that message is that if you get to a city, the very first thing that you've got to do is find a job
Yeah.
that will keep you established.
Yeah.
And long story short, me and my wife had started this interpreting business. You
Right.
first got into it,
Yeah.
interpreting in um, Enid. as a registered Oklahoma court interpreter, and so
Yeah.
we got into court interpreting. I mean, she did it before in LeGrand,
Right. Right.
but we really got into it
Right.
here in Spokane, and here in Spokane, uh, there were judges that showed up to my wife's funeral,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
That's right.
and I didn't know this, but uh, after going back to work, there were even police officers and correctional officers and
Yeah.
detectives that showed up to her funeral. They
Oh
weren't in
wow.
uniform, but
Wow. We missed
they
them.
showed up. Yeah, and
Yeah.
lawyers too. And
Wow.
uh, but I'd say that the job that I have now, the secular job, the interpreting,
Yeah.
doing courtroom interpreting, it's I found a job where even if I had, uh, if there was something in me that said, okay, pack up your stuff and leave, like in the line of work that we do, like I
Yeah.
don't know how I'd be able to uh, go to the courtroom and say, okay, I'm done. I'm moving from here after
Yeah.
knowing them for so long.
Hmm.
And especially the church. Like,
Right.
what do you tell the church?
Yeah.
It's like I'm done. I've got to leave. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if you find that job and you get a love, uh, because if number one, if you don't have a job, and this is why I was bummed when I got laid off. If
Yeah.
you don't have a job, uh, you really can't do anything. I mean, you
Yeah.
can do
Yeah.
all things through Christ. We can do all things through Christ, would strengthen us.
Right. Right.
But I'm talking about like you won't be able to rent a building,
Yeah.
and just coming back to having that job,
Yeah.
when you get to rent that building and you get to see people come into church, and
Yeah.
uh, like there was never a day I ever complained about having to pay the
Yeah.
rent for 4 hours to have service from
Yeah.
my own money.
Right. Right.
Because when I'd see people come into the house of God, lift their hands and get their lives right with God, and God fill them with the Holy Ghost, like that was no amount of money could exchange the feeling that I felt. The reason why they're able to come is because I went out and worked a job
Yeah.
and was able to pay for the 4 hours that we get to use this hotel conference room
Yeah.
just for them to get the Holy Ghost.
Right. So it's all a matter of perspective. Like
Yeah,
somebody could spend $200 for 4 hours and say, "Oh man, I lost money to go buy a gun, or I lost money to
that's right.
go do something." But I mean, if your perspective is, "I love my city,"
Yeah,
and yeah, what was it that the Bible says about the centurion, that he loved his city and he built them a
yeah,
synagogue?
yeah.
Yeah.
He did it all for the people of God.
Yeah.
And because of that, his servant was healed.
Yeah. 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 That's so good. I don't know how long we've been going. We've been going for 1 hour. We're gonna. I didn't realize we've been going this long. Because is there any like story as far as like teaching a Bible study? If somebody is okay, here's where the rubber meets the road. You're trying to get Bible studies in a city, and like sometimes the Bible studies are there, sometimes they're not there.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to sacrifice a lot. For somebody that's starting out, what's your advice for going after a Bible study?
Man. Well, there's there's
Yeah.
a lot of angles that I can hit this from.
So we can
The
when we do part two, we can talk more about it. But just say whatever you want today.
Yeah. So for getting a Bible study, and Bishop always said this to us, and I remember uh, there were times when, like even song leaders and preachers would get wild and
Yeah.
start preaching on holiness and start hitting stuff that uh,
Yeah.
maybe the church people were going through, and Bishop would get up and he'd sit them down
Yeah. Yeah.
while they were preaching.
Yeah.
And I never understood that until I started teaching a Bible study.
Right. Right.
And so I guess my advice is become their friend.
Yeah.
And that's what Bishop always taught us is, if you want someone to really listen to you,
Yeah.
become their friend.
Yeah.
And this is why I believe that the book of Proverbs, when it talks about a friend loveth at all times,
Oh, that's a good
or
line.
if
Yeah.
if you become their friend, they'll run to you whether they're in a crisis or whether things are going great in their life.
Yeah.
They'll come running to you and they'll want to tell you about stuff. But becoming their friend is the first thing you've got to do,
Right.
because
Right.
I really do believe you can really lose people that maybe once in their lifetime had a desire to live for God if you go straight in and try to hammer them with the gospel.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that you can kill that desire. But if you become their friend, then
Yeah.
uh, they'll, because
Right.
Christianity in general faces a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things to be said about Christianity, and especially being apostolic Pentecostal. I
Yeah.
don't know how many times I told people, they'll ask me, "Are you a believer?" And I'll say, "Oh yes," uh, and they'll ask me what kind, and I'll proudly say Pentecostal apostolic,
Yeah.
and they'll look at me weird. So just the fact that you're Pentecostal or apostolic, there's a lot of stories out there. We're crazy. We're
Yeah.
wild. We
Yeah.
we we speak in gibberish.
Yeah.
I, I've heard people actually say that to me. Uh,
Yeah.
well, anyways, but it's becoming their friend is the most important thing to do,
Yeah.
because if you're their friend, you'll love them and you won't want anybody to hurt them,
Yeah.
especially the devil.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why it's so good that we have live stream
Yeah,
because now we opened up the Pentecostal Apostolic Church to everybody.
that's
And
right.
they watch it and they're like, oh, I don't see no snakes up there. I,
Yeah,
I'd heard somebody, I believe it was Brother Nathaniel Urshan, I'd heard talk about this. But thank God for the live stream because once we start going on the internet and people watching, they're like, oh my goodness, I haven't been to this church because I heard my
yeah,
whole life these are crazy people. And then I watch
yeah.
them have church and I'm like, no, they're just hungry after a move of God.
That's
And
right.
but I mean, even us here in Enid, we've had people come to church just because they watched it on the live
Yeah,
stream and they're like, oh, you guys are not crazy people, you know.
yeah, yeah. That's right.
Man, well, it's been really fun. It's been really fun.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do we'll have to do a part two, and we just figured out how to do this today with the phone. So I'm really happy I got to have you on with us today. I want to
Yeah,
say I'm thankful. I know a month ago we didn't know everything. We didn't know if you were going to be here with us, but I'm thankful you're here.
that's right.
And
And I'm thankful
yeah,
that you had me on.
well, I love you. Love the boys.
Okay.
We're gonna go out with this song. We got church in a little bit. I know you guys have church in a little bit too. Was there anything else
Yeah.
you wanted to say before we go?
No,
Okay.
no. We love you guys, and we're praying for you guys.
All right. Well, God bless you guys. We love you guys too,
Okay.
and we're praying for you guys too. One
Okay.
Lord, one
God bless.
faith. One Lord, one faith, one baptism.
That's right.